Hello everyone. Today we'll be building a task manager application using Flask. Flask is a Python framework that could be used for web development or web application in general. So we're going to be using Flask, SQL Alchemy, and MySQL. In this application, users will be able to add, view, and delete tags. We will also explore how to set up MySQL database and connect it to our Flask application. First, let's set up our development environment. Ensure you have Python installed on your computer. If you don't have Python installed, you can simply open your web browser and then search for Python. And then I'm going to click on the first link and I will hover on the download tab and then click on Python to begin the installation. So I'm just going to start the download. I'm going to start the download and the download will begin. So I'm going to click on open folder, and right here I'm going to double click to install Python. So you can see Python is already installed and I'm asked to upgrade. Now, if you don't have Python installed and it's your first time installing Python, make sure you select add Python to path. So you're going to see a box. You're going to check that box before you hit on the install. So right now, I'm not going to do any upgrade. I'm just going to go straight to the application development. So I'm just going to cancel this. Next, you want to make sure that you also have MySQL installed on your system. Now I have a workbench installed on my computer. So I'm just going to open it. So it's right here on my desktop. Now there are other tools you can use to install MySQL. So workbench is one of them. So you can use any tool of your choice. So now I already have a local instance, so I'm just going to click to start a connection and I'm going to enter my password and hit OK. And right here I have my connection established with a graphical user interface. So I'm just going to minimize this and I'll come back to it. So we have the necessary software installed, which is MySQL Workbench, which equally installs a MySQL server, and then we have Python installed. So right now I'm going to create a directory for my application on my desktop. So I'm going to right click, then new folder. So I'm going to call this tags_application, just like this. So tags_application, that's my working directory. So I'm going to right click on this and then open in Windows Terminal. So I'll open this folder or our working directory in Windows Terminal. So here we have it. Next, I'm going to create a virtual environment. So I'm going to say Python -m, then virtual environment, venv. Oops. Once you install Python, Python comes with a virtual environment. And then I want to call my folder, which is going to house my virtual environment, my env. So I'm going to call it my env. So I'm going to hit enter and then we'll have to wait until the command executes. And here we go. It has created it. So now we are going to activate the virtual environment. In case you don't know what virtual environment is, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on our folder and I'm going to open this with, or I can simply open my favorite text editor or code editor. So I'm using Visual Studio Code. So then I'm just going to drag this to the Visual Studio Code, and then I have my folder here. So you can see my virtual environment that was created and is stored in my env. Okay, so I'm going to minimize that and then continue executing other commands. So the next thing is I'm going to activate my virtual environment. So to activate your virtual environment, you have to call your folder my env, which is the folder I installed my virtual environment. Then I'm going to say script. So make sure the first X is capital letter, uppercase, scripts, and then I'm going to say activate. Then hit enter, and here we go. Our virtual environment is activated. So next we are going to install some packages. So we are going to use pip to install Flask. So I'm going to say pip install, and the first package we are going to install is Flask. Like I said earlier, Flask is a Python framework for web application. So Flask, and then I also want to install Flask SQL Alchemy. Flask SQL Alchemy, and then by MySQL, and then hit enter, and this will begin installing Flask on our virtual environment. So we have successfully installed Flask and SQL Alchemy. SQL Alchemy is an object relational mapper. It's actually a tool that we can use to interact with our MySQL. And then we also installed PyMySQL package to connect to our MySQL database. So now I'm going to minimize this and then go back to my code editor. Now we are going to set up our project structure. We are going to create a directory and some files. So I'm going to right click and then create. First of all, let me create a directory. So you can right click, new folder, and this folder I'm going to call it template. And within this template folder, I'm going to create two files. So the first one is going to be base.html, and then I'm going to create the next one, and this is going to be index.html. all right, next I'm going to create another folder, and I'm going to call this static. Now these folders are required in Flask. So the template folders are where your front end codes are stored, and then we have the static for your styles, your assets, and all of that. So on the static, I'm going to create a new file. So let me create a folder first. I'm going to call that folder CSS, right? And then within the folder CSS, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call that file style.css. right? So we have static, and within the static we have this. So if we go to the folder itself, so you can see static, and we have CSS, and inside CSS we have style.css. all right, then next we are going to create some files on the root directory. So here is the root directory. So we are not creating any file inside a folder, so on the root directory. So I'm going to call this file app.py. So this is going to be our main file, and I'm going to create another one. I'm going to call this config.py, and this is going to store our configuration codes, and this is going to be models.py, just like this. All right, now we're going to start with the configuration, our database configuration files. So the configuration file will allow us to set up our database connection details. Kindly note that the purpose of this lecture is not to teach you Python, it's to demonstrate how to interact with MySQL using Python. So if this is your first time writing a Python code, I encourage you to check out my other courses on introductory lessons on Python. So I'm going to provide the link in this section of this video so you could take the courses, but I'll do my best to make this as simple as possible. So on this section of this video, I have provided a link to all the code that we'll be needing for this application. So first, you can see start config.py, and then we have config.py. So I'm just going to copy all of this, Ctrl C, and I'm going to paste that in the config. So if I paste that, and here we go. So here on this code, we have imported OS, which is operating system. Is actually a module in Python, and then we created a class called config, and the class config is holding the configuration settings of our Flask application. So here we have SQL Alchemy database URL, which is an attribute, and this is going to connect to our MySQL. So right here we are going to create a database. So I'm going to remove all this. I'm going to create a database and then come back to fill the name of the database right here. So let's go to our workbench, and on our workbench I'm going to create a database. So I'm going to say create database, and I'm going to call this database tax_db, and I'm going to execute this. So if I refresh, so you can see we have tax_db. So that is all we can do for now. Then we have to go back to our configuration settings and make sure that we rename the database as tax_db. And then here you are going to specify the password of your database. So my password is this, and then the user is root. So if you have specified a different thing for your user when you're setting up your MySQL workbench, you have to specify the user right here. So my user name is root, and then this is my password. The host is localhost, and then the database name is tax_db. Once you have this set, so I'm going to save that file. So the next thing is model. Now you may be asking, why do we need a model? The model defines the structure of our database table and the relationship between them. So I'm going to go over to the code, and here I have the model. So I'm going to copy everything on the model, Ctrl C, and then I'll go back, and then I'm going to paste that right here. Now let's go through the models.py. Now first we imported the Flask SQL Alchemy, and we have the class. So this is like the class imported from the Flask SQL Alchemy package. So this is the class. So if I hover my mouse on it, so you can see it's a class. So like I said earlier, SQL Alchemy is an ORM. That means Object Relational Mapper, that allows you to interact with the database in an object-oriented way. So on the next line, we created an instance of our SQL alchemy, and we assign that to a variable db. So the essence of this is that the instance is going to be used to manage our database. So here you can see db.model, db.colon, and all of that. So we define a class called tags, and the tags is going to inherit from the db.model. So our new class that we define is going to inherit from the db.model. Now take note that the class tags represents the table in the database, where each instance of the class corresponds to a row in the table. So on the first one, we defined a column named ID, and we also have the next column named title, description, and then created at. So we have 4 columns that will be created when we run our application. It's not yet created, so even if we go back to our workbench, so you can see tags db. If we go to tables, you can see we have no table right here. So when the application runs, it's going to create all of this, and then we define a data type for each of the columns. So you can see we have the integer, string, and then the number of acceptable characters, string, and date time, and then we define this as a primary key, so which is going to be unique, and these are nullable, and all of that. So if you have done this, so you can hit on save or Ctrl S on your keyboard. So the next thing we are going to do is to get our base.html. So I'm going to copy everything on the base.html, then I will go to my template, then on the base.html, which is going to be our front end, I'm going to paste that code. So these are just HTML codes, and then most importantly on the body we have a bootstrap class. Now basically we are using bootstrap and not a regular HTML. Bootstrap is a front-end framework for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So it makes things easy and responsive. So most importantly, on the body, we have a container that holds what we call Jinja 2 template engine. So Flask uses Jinja 2 template engine for rendering Python on HTML pages. So we have a block content which defines a starting point, and then we have a end block who defines an end point. So for our good, we can save, and then let's go to the next file. The next is index.html. So I'm going to copy everything on the index. Okay, here we go. So Ctrl C, and on the index I'm going to paste this. Now on the index we have extend base.html, and then we have the block content which defines the starting point, and then we have the end block. Now what it means is that we have the base.html. That means everything inside the index.html goes in here. So that is why we have the block content and the end block. So everything goes in between. So the index.html can be seen right here in between the starting and the ending. So you have to extend it, and then you start the block content, and then you end the block content. So if you are not yet comfortable with Python or want to strengthen your skills, I highly recommend enrolling in one of my Python courses. This will provide you with the necessary background to make the most out of this course. Next, we are going to do some styling. So we have our style.css. I'm just going to copy everything, Ctrl C, and then in the static I'm just going to save this. So we have the body which defines everything on the body, So it's going to, we have a background color of this. We have H1, the btn primary, and the btn danger. So I'm going to save this, and then finally we have our main file. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to first, so I'm going to copy everything from here so I can explain it bit by bit, and then I'm going to paste. So the first thing we did was to import the necessary modules from the Flask package. So we say from Flask, import Flask. So Flask is the main class for creating our Flask application, and then we have the render template. The render template is used to render HTML templates. So for these templates to be rendered, we need this module or package called render templates. Then we also have request. Request is used to handle incoming request data. And then we have redirect. Redirect is used to redirect users to a different URL, and equally used for URL route. So we have URL for URL routes. So if we go to the base.html, the index.html, so we can see URL for. So the URL for is used to generate URLs for routes. Next, we imported our config file. So remember, we have defined a configuration file, so we need to import it. So from config, import config, and then from models, import db and tags. So from the models, we have the model, and we have to import the db and tags class. So next, we created an instance of the Flask application, and then we assigned it to a variable called app. And then this allows us to determine the root part of our application. So next, this line loads the configuration settings from the config class into our Flask application. So like I said, we have the app.py as the main Flask application. So the line loads the configuration settings for us into the app, and then we initializes the SQL Alchemy database. So next, we create a database. So we just printed print creating tables. So if this runs successfully, we're going to have this being printed in our command line or command prompt. So we're going to have it printed right here, just to show that everything is working correctly. And then once this run, creates all table for us, and it's going to say table created. So next, we have the route. Now the route defines the root URL. So this is like the first page or the index. Now in order to explain this, I'm just going to copy this. We have the last if underscore name. So I'm going to copy this and then have it pasted right here. Now this line or block checks if the script is being run directly as opposed to importing. We imported modules, but we want to make sure or check that the script is running directly. So if it is, the Flask application is started and debugging is enabled. So you can see debug is true. So if we are running straight from this, then debug equal to true. So if I save this file, so I'm going to run this file, which is going to create our table and equally demonstrate what this route means. So now I will go back to my command line, and then I'm going to say Python space app.py. So our main app is app.py. If I hit enter, and here we go. So you can see creating tables. So that means our table was created successfully. Table created, and our Flask app is running. So let's find out if our table is created. So let's let's refresh first, then tags db, then tables, and here we go. So you can see our table has been created with ID, title, description, and created at. We can say use tax underscore db, and then I want to select star from tax. So tax is our table name, just like this. So the star means all, so you're going to select every record in the star. So if I run this, and here we go, so you can see basically we have no record inserted. So our application is working correctly. And then here we are being given a URL or a link to access or to view our application on the browser. So you can see debug mode is on, and this is a development server. So once you are ready to push or deploy this online, you have to change this to false. You have to change this to false. So when you are developing, it has to be true, so we can debug our application or code. So right here, I'm going to click or just simply copy, or I'll hold Control on my keyboard, or Command if you're using Mac. Then I'm just going to click, and this will open in one of the browsers. And here we go. Build error, could not build URL for endpoint, add tags, did you meet static instead? All right, so what we're going to do is we need some of this code for everything to work correctly. So what endpoint means is that right here, the 127.0.0.1.5000 is our default route. Now this is the same thing as what we are seeing right here. Now let's say I have something like about. So that means for this code to be accessed, I need to navigate to that route about and hit enter. So but this is not going to work because we need the add tags endpoint. So let's go back to our code, and then I'm going to copy this and then the add tags endpoint. Control C and go back to our code. Just below this, I'm going to add this. So now we have, I'm going to modify this. So this is how it is. So we have the first route, then we have another route which is going to add records to the database, and then we have another route for deleting. Now, like I said, if this is your first time going through a Python code or programming with Python, I encourage you to check out the link in the course material or in the description box below, so you could take an introductory lessons on Python. Now, if we are good, then we can save our file, and let's go back to our application and refresh. And here we go. So we have successfully created our app. So let's add some tags. So let's say complete the car deal. So I just want to write a tags, and then description, I'm going to complete the tax deal today. So this is just for demonstration purposes, and then I'm going to click on add tags. So once you click on add tags, you are basically accessing the URL add tags. You are accessing the URL add tags. So it's going to request the title, which is going to come from right here, and then it's going to also request the description from right here, and then it's going to assign that to a variable. So it's going to get the title and description, assign that to a variable, and this will be added to our database. And once it's added to our database, the next thing is going to redirect to our index. So that is why when a tag is being added, automatically it goes back to the index. So if I add another one, complete the integration, I have completed the integration. So add tags. So if we look at it, so that's added, and we can equally delete our tags. So this is the logic behind the deletion. It's going to take the ID. Every item right here has an ID, so you can see delete, then we have an ID 2, and then this is ID 1. So delete slash what, the ID, and the ID is actually coming from the database. So from the database, we've just added 2 tags. So let's go to our workbench, and we're going to rerun this, and here we go. So we can see the title, we see the description, and then we can see the timestamp. So you can see the ID I talked about, the ID 1 and ID 2. So if I click on this, it's accessing the ID 2, so I can delete and it's gone. So if I go back to the database, refresh, and you can see it's gone. So in this session, we have successfully built a simple task manager application using Flask, SQL Alchemy, and MySQL. We've covered setting up the environment, defining database models, creating routes and templates, and managing our database with MySQL Workbench. Now, I want to believe that this foundational knowledge will help you build more complex applications in future. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do well to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thank you for joining me, and happy coding.